Hey, today I wanted to make a quick video about two questions that come very often is how can I convince my senior leadership that we should invest more in brand and how to move away from multi-touch attribution for the brand part. And the way I do it with my clients is often through a story. For example, the first very important concept that you need to understand and your decision makers need to understand is the 595 rule, which is 5% of your ideal customers are in market at any given time. Of course, that's a rule of thumb. It depends on the industry, it depends on the product, it depends on a lot of things, but the message remains the same across all industries and across all products is that you have a very tiny percentage of people ready to buy now versus the number of ideal customer that you have. And one way, a very good example, most of you don't need to buy a car right now, but if I ask you, what car would you buy and why? If you need to buy a car tomorrow because your car just broke down, most of you will be able to give me a very precise answers of 2-3 brands and the reason why. And that's what we call the top of mind. And what's going to happen is that in most cases, like about 80%, 90%, the conclusion varies, but in the extreme large case, people will buy a product they already know. And so the brand that you already think about now are the brand you're going to most likely buy. And that's the concept of top of mind. And so the more you're on the top of the mind of users, the bigger is your market share. So that's a very big, important point that you need to understand. And your decision maker, your CEO, your CFO has to understand is that there is a strong correlation between the top of mind and the market share, and therefore the revenue. And so this is one of the big reasons why you should invest in brand, is because you want to be in the top of the mind. You want to be those brands that users are thinking of before they need to buy the product. Because the thing is, if you mostly invest in those bottom of funnel campaigns just to activate that demand that you have, you are fighting against odds extremely strong against you. Because if, for example, you don't do any brand initiative and people don't think about you, not only you have to convert them, you first have to convince them that you're the right product and then to convert them. It's extremely difficult to change people's mind during the buying process. And so you're going to make your life and your growth much easier if you invest in brand. And so if you need to have that conversation with your CFO, with your CEO, that's the example I would go through is that car example. Ask them. It's like, you don't need a car right now, but if you need to buy a car tomorrow because your car breaks down, what car are you going to buy and why? And then explain what is the importance of top of mind and how we can do that with branding. Now, the second part is ask them, those 2-3 brands that you mentioned, do you think that they can track with multi-touch attribution your decision? The answer is obviously no. No, you can't. And so that's where multi-touch attribution is a failure in a sense, because it's completely misused. Multi-touch attribution can help really on the conversion part. I've used it successfully in 2 scenarios. One is to create a lead scoring model for prioritization for the sale. So you would only send to the sales team the lead that are most likely to convert. Multi-touch attribution for that works well. It also works well when the users start to digest your assets. If you're a SaaS product and you have some logins, some webinars and a lot of things like this, multi-touch attribution can be very useful, because then at that point, a lot of the activity is happening digitally. That's where MTA can help. But on the top of mind brand demand generation, this tool goes nowhere and shouldn't be used at all. And so you have to use different ways. It can be search of voice, search of search. It can be interview with the sales team. Very often, your sales team is asking to the prospect, oh, how did you hear about us? It's not a marketing invention. Like, this is something that the sales team asks very often to understand where the demand comes from, to understand where the client comes from, what is the problem you're trying to solve. All of those very often are already in the sales notes. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Most of the data for a lot of companies is already there. And so that's how I would also explain why we should move away from multi-touch attribution for those kind of initiatives. Because if you try to use that tool to evaluate the impact of your overall strategy, you're going to underallocate on the brand strategy, your market share is going to be lower, and then therefore your growth is going to be lower, and you're going to have difficulties to be profitable, because that's a real problem. If you use MTA, you will have difficulties to grow and to be profitable. I hope the car story really helps. I hope it helps you to understand why brand is important. I hope it gives you some confidence to go talk to your senior leadership and have that conversation with them. And I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.